Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Huffa. It is Friday, June 28th, and this week, Uber locks out drivers, Waymo expands, and Uber loses in California. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Bryant Greening. Bryant, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Jared. Great to be back.
Great to be back. A nice cool day in Chicago, which is nice. A little break from the heat. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's not bad, especially for a couple of days right before July. I can't believe we're this far along.
I know. I just realized next weekend's 4th of July weekend. Unbelievable that it's already happening.
It's crazy. We better enjoy the summer while it's here.
Yeah, seriously. So let's get right into it. We're going to start, obviously, with the first story this week, and it's a big one, guys. Most of you already know about it. Uber is locking out drivers in New York City. This is written by Yahoo Finance, and they reported, quote, Uber Technologies has begun locking New York City drivers out of its app during periods of what they're calling low demand in an attempt to fight a minimum wage rule, and Lyft is threatening to do the same. As a result, some drivers have said their wages have fallen by as much as 50%. The lockouts occur unpredictably, making it difficult for drivers to plan work shifts and treat Uber as a full-time job. Sometimes these episodes can last over an hour. So Uber is saying that access to a platform is based on rider demand at any given time and place, and if demand drops too far below supply, the company will shut out drivers. Holy hell. When I saw this, I was stunned. It's crazy.
It is, and it's really devastating to drivers because so many of these workers depend on constant access to the app in order to make a living. If they can't work when they want to or when they need to, they're unable to make enough to earn a living, to keep a roof over their heads. What we're seeing here is Uber retaliating because New York City and other areas around the country have decided to protect the workers with minimum wages, with floors in earnings, and they're fundamentally the companies are changing the relationship with the drivers. It used to be work anytime, work when you want to. This is a job that gives you the ultimate flexibility, and by turning off the app, by locking drivers out when they want to work, they're taking far more control over the situation, making it so drivers don't control their own hours and don't control their own earnings. I hate this for drivers, and I think it's a bad decision by Uber and Lyft. I think it's going to end up biting them, where it's just a way in which they're controlling the work hours and controlling the workers. And who knows, maybe this could be a way in which Uber and Lyft drivers are able to establish that the requisite control exists, that they are employees, and it could have the exact opposite effect that Uber's trying to create.
That's exactly what I was about to ask you. It sounds like there's a real chance here that this backfires, just like you said, because Uber's argument is remember, they don't even call themselves a transportation company, they call themselves a tech company, and they're saying, look, no, drivers, this is free will. The drivers can do whatever they want. They're independent contractors. We don't have, and their big thing is always hands off. We don't have control. We don't tell them when to drive. We don't, tell them what's best. That's how they've been saying it. And just like you said, now they're literally telling them you can't drive, or now you can drive. I can't imagine lawyers aren't already trying to figure out a way to jump in here.
Right. They're making a schedule. They're just not telling the drivers what the schedule is. So, you can imagine this being any employment situation when the employer is saying you're going to be here working at this time, and that's the way it is. Uber's saying these are the times that we're going to allow drivers on the platform. Some drivers can have access to it. Others don't. They are taking far more control over the workplace with these rules. And each step that they take to increase their control over the workspace makes the driver that much closer to an employee. And a smart lawyer is going to step in here and challenge what Uber's doing. And I really can see this being used as a basis to make drivers employees, meaning Uber's going to be on the hook for all sorts of costs that they're trying to avoid.
Yeah, and at the very least, what this really does is shakes the tree and really highlights, even for drivers who may have been skeptical, about, hey, Uber's not that bad. You just aren't working hard enough, or your strategy's not good enough. Uber really gives us freedom. I can't imagine this isn't shocking a lot of drivers who kind of didn't think Uber would ever do something like this and thought, well, no, it's you guys are struggling because it's your fault, not Uber's fault. And now it's like they're coming after all of you. And it may end up being that this turns into really organized protests, not in large scale.
I can see that. And the other side of this is the passengers. So when Uber is taking drivers off the platform, that means that there's there's fewer drivers to pick up passengers, meaning demand for those few drivers that are on the platform is going to be higher, making wait times longer, perhaps making prices higher. So this could ultimately be seen as some sort of price fixing situation as well, where Uber is inflating the cost of the ride by keeping the number of drivers low and making demand high. So, I mean, the economic implications here could be wide-ranging and widespread as well.
Right. Yeah, this is just absolutely going to be ongoing, and we're going to follow this. And I'm sure by next week we might even have some updates on this. I can't imagine it's going to go away. But let's jump to the second story. Another pretty crazy story here. Waymo, we talked about them last week about recalling their cars and safety issues. Well, guess what? They didn't retract, they expanded. And now they are in L.A. A regulatory board unanimously reaffirmed Waymo's ability to operate its driverless taxi service in Los Angeles just days after a bill that have let local governments regulate the driverless cars stalled in the state. They're basically saying, so how are LA officials responding? By and large, cities and municipalities where Waymo is operating want more regulatory power over these driverless cars, and LA is no exception. The mayor has warned of potential adverse impacts on the residents of Los Angeles if the city doesn't gain more oversight in the car's operation. So, Brian, you literally were talking last week about, man, they really should be, slowly rolling these out or not having them in big cities, and now they're in one of the biggest cities in the country.
It's not shocking. They are operating by the same playbook that the rideshare companies did years ago. They're just bullying their way into cities, not asking for permission, not even really asking for forgiveness, just doing what they want to do. As you can see here, the city officials are kind of at a loss. They obviously want more regulation. They want to ensure that these vehicles are safe before they're on the city streets, but there's not really a way to slow down Waymo. And Waymo is taking advantage of that. So, we're looking at what the mayor actually is quoted in this article saying that there are potential, quote, adverse impacts on the residents of Los Angeles. Well, is that the understatement of the century here? I mean,
right.
There are so many adverse impacts. There's safety, there's economic, you name it right now. These vehicles are not tested. They're not sufficient. Waymo had issues just last week that they were trying to correct. That software update that they said they needed to work out. Well, that happened fast because
right. Not even in the same city.
Now they're expanding. Yeah, it's crazy, and it's just I don't understand how the company feels like it can do this responsibly, or maybe they just don't care, because what we're seeing is a rush to get these vehicles on the street, despite local government actors asking, pleading, begging for them not to be there, or at least being closely controlled. And unfortunately, that's just not happening.
Yeah, I mean, they even say in this article, a bill that would have given cities more ability to impose regulations on these driverless cars was withdrawn after stalling in committee earlier this week. So I believe, just like you said, their strategy is we're just going to Uber it. I'm going to slam these cars through before regulation gets a hold of it, and then they'll just have to they'll have to work around us. The only thing is, as you keep bringing up, this is different than what Uber did, because it was still the same tech. It was using a phone and app, and cars were still driven by people who know how to drive cars. They are pushing through a technology that is struggling to even operate basics. And so it's not just, this is a new type of, another driver on the road. It's like, here's another vehicle that could do anything. We don't even know what these things are going to do I don't know, major storms, major construction. I just don't know how they're going to deal with it.
And we don't know who's going to be responsible when things do go wrong. So when Uber put drivers on the road, we knew that the company had auto insurance. We knew that the driver had auto insurance. We knew that the driver had been trained to operate a vehicle safely by virtue of having a driver's license. Here, we don't know exactly how these vehicles are tested. There's not a driver's license for this robot that's controlling the car. We don't know how the structure is going to be set up in terms of the insurance or liability. People are going to get hurt because there's not a safety net in place, meaning training, experience, certain regulations and standards that need to be met. And in terms of the money, when they do hurt somebody or kill somebody, are we going to go to the manufacturer of the car? Are we going to go to the manufacturer of the AI? Are we going to go to the manufacturer? Like there's so many different levels here that it's just so many unknowns. Like this, it just needs to be sorted out and regulated from top to bottom as to how these things are going to be dealt with, so that we're not figuring them out on the fly.
Right. And obviously that's not happening. I mean, they're clearly saying we're not waiting to regulate. We're not waiting to figure this out. It's going to be a wild year, I can tell you that much. We'll head to our final story here. Uber loses in California, and this is from the New York Post. And they reported a U.S. appeals court on Monday rejected a bid by Uber, opening a new tab in subsidiary Postmates to revive a challenge to a California law that could force the companies to treat drivers as employees rather than independent contractors who are typically less expensive. An 11-judge panel of the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in San Fran upheld a lower court ruling that said Uber failed to show that the 2020 state law, known as AB5, unfairly singled out app-based transportation companies while exempting other industries. Uber said on Monday that the ruling would not change the status of its relationship with its drivers, who are still considered to be part of Prop 22. Brian, my question to you is this: how is this different than what we had discussed, I believe, last week or 2 weeks ago about this? Well, it feels very similar.
Yeah, it's not different. It's just that the next court up decided that the lower court was correct in their decision. So, as we've talked about, Uber is working their way through the court system, doing everything that they can to try to ensure that their drivers stay independent contractors. And, because if drivers become employees and if drivers are given benefits beyond what Uber currently provides in the independent contractor status, which is basically nothing, it upends the business model. Uber's business is keeping costs as low as possible, not providing things like minimum wages, not providing insurance, not providing paid time off or sick leave. And they're trying to get a court to affirm their business model. And what this court is saying is, no, we're not going to do that. That law was sound. There was no reason to believe that Uber, Lyft, or other gig platforms were unfairly targeted by it. And if a state wants to, particularly in California, if they want to create a law that says that Uber, Lyft, gig workers are employees, it's within their right to do so, and we wouldn't disrupt it.
Yeah, so is really the only thing standing in the way right now of Uber having to treat these drivers as employees is Prop 22 in New York? Is that the deal? Or San Fran, I mean? So like if the initiative of Prop 22 wasn't there, it would be AB5, correct?
That's correct.
So
Prop
it's like
22,
it's like a roadblock.
Yeah, Prop 22 basically overtook AB5. And I think what Uber's trying to do here is say that AB5 was unconstitutional because they don't ever want to face something like that again. Yeah, so right now...
and you could arguably... Could Prop 22 be overturned ever? Could that be another initiative that says, hey, we don't want this, we want to change... Is that their fear?
Yeah, so eventually there could be another proposition. There could be some sort of executive action. There could be a constitutional change. There's many mechanisms for changing laws. And I think what Uber is trying to do in the current fight that it just lost is saying, if this were to ever be reconsidered, we don't think we should have to comply with it. and the court's saying, actually, no, it's fine. Obviously, it's not the law of the land right now because of Prop 22, but they said that law was constitutional, it was valid, and if that's the way that the legislature or the public were to decide to classify workers and demand certain protections and benefits, that would be fine to do.
Got it. Yeah, very interesting stuff. Pretty wild, actually. And I totally see why they're doing it. It makes perfect sense to me, and as you explained it very well. But good to hear. Good to hear that AB5 is still there. Things could change always. So that's our stories for this week. And then Brian, I will give you the floor before we head off into the weekend.
Yeah, as we head into the weekend, we always remind everybody to make sure to reach out to us should anything happen. Car accidents, slips and falls, dog bites, any way that you can be injured on the road or working for a gig platform, we're here to help. We represent drivers, passengers, and victims. We help collect everything from lost wages, medical bills, pain and suffering, any other damage that you sustain. Consultations are always free, and the best way to find our contact information is LegalRideshare.com.
Excellent. And also, drivers, as an announcement here before we head off, we are doing a driver survey. We want to hear from you guys. We have a really small, simple survey. It's about 7 questions, just asking about if you've ever been in an accident before, how your thoughts on attorneys. And we are giving away $100 to 5 drivers randomly selected. So you have until the end of August to fill it out. If you go on our Facebook or Twitter or anything, you'll see the survey link. You just click it. Torsten also mentioned on his YouTube channel, you can find it there as well. So, but that is the end of this week in Rideshare. See you next week.